the grand conspiracy theory of the power brokers. Was this all kind of being puppeteered? I think if Joe Biden doesn't have his disastrous debate performance, I still think they try to push him through. I still think you could make the argument that he gave them the best chance to win if he just had your typical Biden debate performance of the last couple years. It was so bad that it totally changed the game.
I have seen so many people talk about this in such a strange way over the last few days. So it's almost as if we act like real life is this perfect simulation, right? Where we have perfect information at all times and everybody follows that perfect information
Mhm.
logically, which is how hindsight works, right? So that's what people are talking about. Like in hindsight, if we knew this debate would happen this way, if the cognitive decline, we knew it was going to be so severe, then obviously everything would be different. But yeah, if an asteroid didn't hit the earth, the dinosaurs would still be here. I mean, that's not how the real world works. And also, it's not how aging works. People act like aging is a switch where you're perfect and your mental acuity is the same exact way that it was when you're 50, and then all of a sudden the next day you wake up and you have no idea where you are. I mean, yes, do things like that happen very quickly in certain extreme examples? Sure. But that anyone who's dealt with aging relatives know that is not how it works. For most people, it is a gradual decline as you age. Your memory's not quite as sharp. You need to go to bed a little bit earlier. You're physically more tired and slower. And then maybe all of a sudden over a period of 3, 6, 9, 12 months, there is a sharper decline, right? That is often how it happens. And I think it's pretty clear that is what happened with Joe Biden. I'm not a doctor. Obviously, I'm not there around him day to day, but based on just common sense of how aging works and observation, I think that's what happened. So to your point, think about this. Again, you can agree or disagree, but he had an incredibly successful first 2 years, right? And yes, so maybe people say Obama was really running it. He was a figurehead. I know people have their conspiracy theories. He was the president of the United States, right? However, whatever credit you want to give him, like, was he writing the bills by hand at candlelight? No. But he was in charge, bringing the coalitions together, signing the legislation. So you have an incredibly successful 2 years as president in terms of passing meaningful legislation. You survive a midterm better than Barack Obama did, than Bill Clinton did, than really almost any president in modern times has done, right? That's what happened. And then he wants to run again. He Because of course he does. He's wanted this his whole life. He's been successful at it for 2 years, going back to, I'm talking about early 23, the period where it could have changed. He's been incredibly successful at it for 2 years. He survived a red wave that didn't happen. He's polling better than his vice president, significantly better, and than any other Democrat outside of maybe Michelle Obama that's being tested. So the evidence is clear that and he wants it. So what are you going to do? No Democrat's going to challenge him given those circumstances. Like Gavin Newsom's not going to be like all of a sudden, hey, you know what? I'm going to take on this incumbent president who's polling better than I am and who has this legislative record and just survived without a red wave. I'm going to go. I mean, of course not. So yes, in the real world of how things actually work, it's not some grand conspiracy. The evidence showed you Joe Biden probably gave you the best chance until he didn't. And he didn't because the cognitive decline, as we've seen, really kicked in. And then it was just laid bare at the debate for everybody to see. And at that point, you had to have blinders on to not see what was clearly in front of your face. But there were still people then who argued Biden still gives us the best chance. I mean, AOC was making a video about it a few days ago. So it's not like people didn't believe Biden gave you the best chance. Some people still believe it today. I don't. I didn't after the debate. But so you can understand how, again, it's the real world versus like a simulation where we have perfect information. So I think these conspiracy theories that Democrats rigged everything to get to this result, which is what you're seeing now in the right wing, a lot of right wing pundits and people online. It's like, this is a coup. They're using the word coup, right? Democrats rigged it. Okay, yes, there is some truth to that. As you mentioned with RFK Jr., parties often rig elections in the primaries to try to help the incumbent. That's why incumbent presidents don't get challenged a lot, right? Because it's very hard. We saw this with Hillary and Bernie Sanders in 2016. She wasn't even an incumbent. The party's going to tilt the playing field, shall we say, to make it harder for the challengers. And also, people are going to make decisions. Like Donald Trump decided not to debate this year. RFK and Marianne Williamson could have had debates, and Dean Phillips, if RFK had stayed in. Nothing was stopping them from having a debate, but Joe Biden wasn't going to show up. Does that mean it wasn't democratic? People still voted. Donald Trump didn't show up to any debates. Does that mean he didn't actually win the Republican nomination? No. So my point is, do parties and do candidates try to tilt the playing field to make it better for them or easier for them to win? Yes, that's what happens in primaries. That doesn't mean that it's a coup. Persuading a man, okay, who isn't even the official nominee yet. The nomination becomes official at the convention. Nobody took the nomination from Joe Biden. He wasn't yet the nominee. He was certainly the presumptive nominee, but he wasn't the nominee. That's the first point. That's kind of important. The second point is Kamala Harris was his vice president. If he's going to step aside and it's going to be her, that, people were voting for Biden knowing that Harris was his vice president. The third point is a coup or an attempted coup is trying to or successfully overturning the results of an election. That's what it is. We just had one attempted in America, like not long ago. We have a fresh reminder of what it is. It is not pressuring and trying to persuade an elderly man who has clearly declined to not run a race that he's not up for, and then he begrudgingly perhaps comes to that conclusion and announces he's not running. That is not a coup. That is actually what a responsible party should do. That's what you should do. Because what's the alternative? Putting your head in the sand and saying, oh no, Democratic primary voters picked him over Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson. Therefore, we're going to run an 81-year-old man to try to be president until he's 86, who just had the worst debate performance we've ever seen and is clearly diminished. Is that what people think Democrats should have done? Like, would that have been the more responsible thing? Of course not. It's a ludicrous argument. I mean, it really is. The only argument I've heard that I don't think it's accurate, but that at least maybe you could kind of twist it into being a quote unquote coup is if you believe that a group of Democrats got together and they knew all along that they were going to force Biden out before the convention, but they didn't want a primary process because I guess they wanted Harris and they thought maybe she'd lose. So therefore they covered up Biden's. I mean, think about what you'd have to believe. You'd have to believe they covered up Biden's mental decline to get him through a primary, knowing all along they were then later going to switch him out because they wanted it to be Harris, but they didn't think Harris as the vice president could win the primary. You would have to believe all those things. Like, they're sitting there a year ago and they're devising this diabolical scheme and they know exactly how it's going to play out. I mean, look, people can believe whatever they want to believe. But again, I think the much more compelling case is what I laid out earlier in terms of how the dominoes fell.
Yeah. And I agree with most of what you just said. But to me, it does still feel at the end of the day undemocratic. And a lot of it, I do think, is because of circumstance. I think you can kind of go the conspiracy theory route here and there, but big picture, I think it's a lot of things happened very rapidly. And the biggest part was Joe Biden's rapid decline that really accelerated over the last, let's say, 18 months or so.